The photo on the wall rain hammered against the glass windows of the 43rd floor. The city below looked blurred, distant, almost unreal. Jim Walton stood silently outside the conference room, his worn jacket dripping water onto the polished marble floor. In his trembling hand was a folder filled with unpaid bills, school notices, and a final warning from the bank. He had only come to the building for one reason: a job, any job. 3 years earlier, Jim had owned a small repair business. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. He had a loving wife named Emily, and a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie, who believed her father could fix anything in the world. Then life changed. Emily passed away, suddenly after a serious illness. The hospital bills destroyed their savings, the business collapsed, friends disappeared, and now, at 42 years old, Jim was standing in the lobby of one of the most powerful companies in the country, hoping someone would give him a second chance. "Sir," the receptionist looked at him carefully. "You can go in now." Jim nodded nervously and entered the executive office. The room was enormous. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. Awards, photographs, and framed newspaper covers surrounded a massive desk overlooking the city skyline. Behind the desk sat billionaire investor Daniel Crawford, a man known for building companies from nothing, a man famous for being ruthless, a man who almost never met job applicants. Personally, Jim swallowed hard. "Mr. Crawford, thank you for seeing me." Daniel barely looked up from his papers. "You worked in mechanical repair?" "Yes, sir." "You lost your business?" Jim hesitated. "Yes, why?" The question hit harder than expected. Jim's throat tightened. "My wife got sick. I spent everything trying to save her." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Daniel looked directly at him. Not coldly, not critically, but almost painfully. Jim noticed it immediately, and then his eyes drifted toward the wall behind the billionaire's desk. He froze. His heartbeat stopped. There, framed in silver beside a company award, was a photograph of Emily, his wife, smiling, alive. Jim stared at it in disbelief. The air left his lungs. His voice cracked. "Why do you have my wife's photo?" Daniel Crawford instantly stood up. His face lost all color. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Rain crashed louder against the windows. Jim stepped forward slowly. "That's Emily," he whispered. "That's my wife." Daniel's hands trembled slightly. Then the billionaire said something that changed everything. "I've been searching for you for years." Jim's mind went blank. "What?" Daniel looked at the photograph again, his expression filled with regret. "She saved my life once," he said quietly. Jim stared at him in confusion. "That's impossible. Emily never even talked about you." Daniel walked toward the window. "She wouldn't have." The billionaire lowered his head. "Because if she had told you the truth, you would have hated me." Jim felt a chill run down his spine. "What truth?" Daniel turned slowly. His eyes were filled with guilt. "The reason your wife died," he paused, "started with me." Jim's fists clenched instantly. The room suddenly felt smaller, dangerous. Every painful memory came rushing back. The hospital room, the funeral, Sophie crying herself to sleep asking when Mommy was coming home. "What are you saying?" Jim demanded. Daniel reached for a locked drawer. Inside was an old envelope, yellowed with age. Written on the front were 2 words: "For Jim." Jim's hands shook as he took it. "That's Emily's handwriting." Daniel nodded. "She made me promise I would only give it to you when the time was right." Jim stared at the envelope like it was a ghost from another life. "Why now?" Daniel answered softly. "Because someone is trying to destroy both of us." Before Jim could respond, the office door suddenly burst open. A frightened assistant rushed inside. "Mr. Crawford, you need to see this immediately." She handed him a tablet. Daniel's expression darkened instantly. Jim looked at the screen. Breaking news headlines flashed across every major network. Crawford, Industries under federal investigation below. The headline was a leaked photograph, a photograph of Emily standing beside Daniel Crawford, taken years ago. Jim looked up slowly. "What is this?" Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. That photo was never supposed to exist, and somewhere deep inside the building, someone was watching them both, smiling. The letter Emily left behind. The television screens across the office suddenly lit up with the same breaking news alert. Reporters crowded outside. Crawford Industries headquarters. Flashing cameras exploded like lightning. Employees whispered nervously in the hallways, and in the center of it all stood Jim Walton, gripping the letter written by his late wife so tightly that the paper nearly crumpled in his hands. His heart pounded. Nothing made sense anymore. The photo, the investigation, the billionaire Emily. It felt like the ground beneath. His life had cracked open. Daniel Crawford dismissed his assistant quietly. Cancel every meeting. But sir, now, the assistant nodded nervously and hurried out. The office doors closed. Silence returned. Jim looked directly at Daniel. You better explain everything. Daniel didn't argue. He walked toward a small table near the window and slowly removed his expensive watch, setting it down carefully like a man preparing for judgment. When I met Emily, he began, I wasn't the man people think I am today. Jim's jaw tightened. You expect me to believe that? No, Daniel replied honestly, but it's the truth. Rain continued falling outside as Daniel spoke. 15 years ago, Crawford Industries was collapsing. Investors were abandoning me. I had debts everywhere. I was desperate. Jim listened silently. One night, Daniel continued, I drove for hours trying to clear my head. I was exhausted, angry, careless. His voice became quieter. And I caused an accident. Jim felt his stomach twist. A young woman's car went off the road trying to avoid mine. Jim froze. No, Daniel nodded slowly. That woman was Emily. Jim stepped backward instantly. You're lying. She survived, Daniel said quickly. She wasn't seriously injured. But when I went back to help her, she recognized me from the news. Jim's breathing became heavy. She could have sued me, destroyed me publicly. My company would have died overnight. But she didn't, Jim whispered. Daniel looked at Emily's photograph again. No, instead, she asked me a question I'll never forget. The billionaire's eyes became distant. She asked, if you survive this moment, will you become a better man? Or a richer bad one? Jim stood speechless. Daniel gave a weak smile. That question haunted me. For the first time since entering the office, Jim saw something unexpected in the billionaire's face. Pain. Real pain. She made me promise something that night. Daniel said, what? That if I rebuilt my company, I would spend my life helping people who lost everything. Because she said struggling people deserve dignity, not pity. Jim remembered Emily saying those exact words years ago while helping a homeless woman outside a grocery store. His chest tightened painfully. She never told me any of this. She didn't want you carrying her burdens. Daniel replied. Jim looked down at the envelope again. For Jim, his hand shook as he finally opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph. The photo showed Emily standing beside a much younger Daniel Crawford near a damaged roadside car. On the back, Emily had written, people can change, Jim. Sometimes broken moments create better people. Jim unfolded the letter slowly. His eyes scanned the page, and Emily's words came alive again. Jim, if you are reading this, then life has probably become harder than I ever wanted for you. First, I need you to know something important. None of what happened to me was your fault. You gave me the happiest years of my life. But there are truths I hid because I wanted you to live peacefully, not angrily. Daniel Crawford once made a terrible mistake. But I saw something rare in him afterward. Genuine regret. Most people become prisoners of their worst decisions. Very few choose to become better. He chose differently. The scholarships, hospitals, shelters, and community programs his company funded over the years, many of them happened because he kept the promise he made that night. If you ever meet him, don't judge him only by his wealth or his mistakes. Judge him by what he became afterward. And Jim, there's one more thing you must know. Someone inside Crawford Industries has been hiding dangerous secrets for years. If the truth ever comes out, innocent people could get hurt. Daniel tried to stop them once. That's why powerful people became afraid of him. Jim stopped reading. A cold silence filled the room. He looked up slowly. What secrets? Daniel's face hardened immediately. That's the problem. He walked toward the television screen showing the investigation. I don't fully know anymore. Jim frowned. What does that mean? It means someone inside my company has been moving money illegally for years using my business network. Every time I got close to uncovering who was responsible, evidence disappeared. Jim stared at him. And Emily knew? Daniel nodded once. She discovered something before she died. The words hit Jim like a punch. What did she discover? Before Daniel could answer, the lights in the office suddenly shut off. Everything went dark. Emergency alarms began, blaring across the building, red. Backup lights flashed through the hallways. Then, a deep computerized voice echoed overhead. "Security breach detected." Jim turned sharply. "What's happening?" Daniel's expression became deadly serious. "They found us." A loud, metallic crash echoed outside the office. Footsteps. Fast coming closer. Daniel immediately opened another drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. He shoved it into Jim's hand. "Take this and leave through the emergency stairwell." Stared at it. "What is this?" "Evidence." "Evidence of what?" Daniel looked him directly in the eye. "The reason your wife was terrified during the final weeks of her life." The footsteps outside grew louder. Voices shouted in the hallway. Jim's pulse exploded. "Come with me," he said. "But," Daniel slowly shook his head, "if they see us together, they'll never stop chasing you." A heavy bang slammed against the office door. Again. Again. The hinges began cracking. Jim looked at Daniel in disbelief. "What did Emily uncover?" Daniel answered quietly. "She found proof that someone was destroying families for profit." The door burst inward. Shadowy figures rushed into the room. But Daniel Crawford suddenly shouted, "Run!" And Jim Walton ran into the darkness, clutching the flash drive that could destroy billionaires or get him killed. The flash drive. Jim Walton sprinted down the emergency stairwell 2 steps at a time. The red emergency lights flashed around him like warning signals from another world. Behind him, distant shouting echoed through the building. His breathing became ragged. His hand gripped the flash drive so tightly it hurt. He didn't even fully understand why he was running anymore. Hours earlier, he had been unemployed and worried about paying Sophie's school fees. Now armed men were storming a billionaire's office while his dead wife's secrets unraveled one terrifying layer at a time. None of it felt real. He reached the parking garage level and pushed through the steel door. Cold air hit his face. The garage was almost empty. Jim hurried toward the exit, then stopped instantly. 2 black SUVs rolled into the garage at high speed. Their headlights flooded the concrete floor. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out. Not police, not security, something worse. Jim quickly ducked behind a pillar. Heart hammering. One of the men spoke into an earpiece. "He's still inside." Another answered coldly, "Find the flash drive before Crawford talks." Jim's pulse froze. They weren't after money, they were after evidence. He backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound, but suddenly, crack, a loose piece of glass snapped beneath his shoe. Every head turned. "There!" Jim ran instantly. Footsteps thundered behind him. He darted between parked cars as the men chased him through the garage. "Stop him!" A hand nearly grabbed his jacket. Jim shoved a rolling cart into the attackers and sprinted toward the exit gate. Rain exploded against his face as he burst outside onto the crowded street. Car horns screamed. People shouted. Jim pushed through the sidewalk crowd. Desperately, he turned the corner and slammed directly into someone. A young woman wearing a dark hooded coat grabbed his arm before he fell. "Move if you want to stay alive," she whispered. Before Jim could react, she pulled him into a narrow alley. The black SUVs roared past the street entrance seconds later. Jim stared at the stranger in shock. "Who are you?" The woman looked around carefully before lowering her hood. She appeared to be in her early 30s, sharp-eyed, calm, and strangely familiar. "My name is Rachel." Jim stepped backward slightly. "How do you know me?" "I knew Emily." Jim's entire body tensed. No. Everybody suddenly knew Emily. "I'm done trusting strangers." Rachel reached slowly into her coat pocket. Jim prepared to run, but instead, she handed him a small photograph. Jim looked at it. His breath caught instantly. It showed Emily holding Sophie as a baby, standing beside Rachel. On the back was Emily's handwriting. "If anything happens to me, help Jim. Jim looked up slowly. You were her friend? Rachel nodded sadly. She saved my life once. Jim stared at her. The same words Daniel had said. Who exactly had Emily been? Rachel glanced toward the street nervously. We don't have time. They'll search the entire area soon. Who are they? Jim demanded. Rachel hesitated, then answered carefully. People with enough money to erase lives. Jim looked down at the flash drive. What's on this thing? Rachel's expression darkened. Proof. Proof of what? That several powerful corporations have been poisoning low-income communities for years through illegal waste dumping. Jim's eyes widened. What? Emily discovered financial records linking fake charities, medical companies, and construction firms together. Families got sick while executives became richer. Jim suddenly remembered Emily spending late nights researching something on her laptop during the final months before her illness worsened. At the time, she told him it was just volunteer work. His stomach twisted. She knew all this? Rachel nodded, and she planned to expose it. Jim felt sick, then her death. Rachel quickly interrupted. No, Emily's illness was real. Don't go down that road. She genuinely got sick. Jim lowered his eyes. Part of him felt relieved hearing that, but another part felt devastated. Emily had carried this terrifying burden while battling illness alone. Why? Why wouldn't she tell him? Rachel seemed to read his thoughts. She wanted to protect you and Sophie. Jim looked away silently. That sounded exactly like Emily, always. Protecting others before herself. Even at the end, Rachel carefully pointed toward a small cafe across the street. There's a safe place nearby. We can check the drive there. Jim hesitated. Every instinct told him not to trust anyone. But he also had nowhere else to go, and Sophie, his daughter, was home alone with a neighbor, right? Now if these people discovered who he was, fear shot through him instantly. My daughter, Rachel nodded. I know. That's why we need to move fast. They hurried through the rain toward the cafe. Inside, only a few customers sat quietly near the windows. Rachel led Jim downstairs into a storage room. To his surprise, hidden behind old shelves was a small, secure office filled with computer equipment. Jim stared. What is this place? A group of former journalists and investigators use it, Rachel explained. People trying to expose corruption safely. She inserted the flash drive into a laptop. The screen loaded. Slowly, folders appeared. Financial reports, internal emails, medical records, photos, videos, and one folder labeled Project Hollow. Rachel clicked it open. Jim's blood ran cold. Inside were hundreds of documents connecting major executives, contractors, and political figures to illegal toxic dumping sites near poor neighborhoods, children's schools. Entire communities exposed to dangerous chemicals, all hidden through fake companies. Jim covered his mouth in horror. This can't be real. Rachel looked grim. It is. Then another file caught Jim's attention, a video recording labeled, If Something Happens to Me. His heart stopped. That's Emily. Rachel slowly clicked play. The screen flickered, and suddenly Emily appeared alive on camera, tired, pale, but smiling gently. Jim's eyes instantly filled with tears. Hi, Jim, Emily whispered through the screen. Jim nearly collapsed hearing her voice again. If you're watching this, she continued softly, then things have become dangerous. Rachel quietly stepped back, giving him space. Emily looked directly into the camera. I'm sorry I kept so many secrets. I didn't want Sophie growing up afraid. Jim wiped his eyes shakily. Emily continued. The people behind Project Hollow will do anything to protect themselves. They destroy evidence, manipulate investigations, and silence whistleblowers. She paused weakly. But there's one person you must trust. Suddenly the video glitched. Static filled the screen. Rachel frowned. What happened? The image returned briefly, and Emily whispered one final name. Jim's face lost all color. No. At that exact moment, upstairs the cafe door slammed open. Heavy footsteps rushed inside. Voices shouted, Search every room. Rachel's eyes widened. They found us already. Jim looked back at Emily's frozen image on the screen. The final name she spoke echoed, in his mind, a name he never expected. Daniel Crawford, not as an ally, but as the man she feared most. The man Emily feared. The pounding footsteps upstairs grew, louder, Drawers crashed, furniture overturned. The armed men were tearing through the cafe room by room. Rachel quickly pulled the laptop cable. Free, we have to go now, but Jim couldn't move. His eyes remained locked on the frozen image of Emily on the screen. Trust no one, especially Daniel Crawford. Those words echoed through his mind like thunder. Just hours earlier, Daniel had spoken about Emily with regret and respect. Now everything felt poisoned with doubt. Was the billionaire manipulating him from the beginning? Was the entire emotional story just another lie? Rachel grabbed Jim's shoulder. Jim, he snapped back to reality. They're coming, she warned. A loud crash sounded directly above them. The storage room ceiling trembled. Rachel hurried toward the back wall and pulled aside a metal shelf, revealing a narrow hidden passage. Jim stared in shock. There's a tunnel. Old delivery route, Rachel said quickly. Move. The voices upstairs became clearer. Check downstairs. Jim shoved the flash drive into his pocket and followed Rachel into the narrow concrete tunnel just as footsteps thundered down the stairs behind them. The hidden passage was dark and damp. Water dripped from rusted pipes overhead. Jim's breathing echoed loudly as they hurried forward. Finally, after several minutes, they emerged behind an abandoned warehouse several blocks away. Rain still poured across the city. Rachel leaned against the wall, catching her breath. We bought ourselves maybe 10 minutes. Jim stared at her intensely. You knew about Daniel. Rachel didn't answer immediately. You should have told me. I needed you. Focused on surviving first. Jim stepped closer, angrily. Was he involved or not? Rachel looked torn. It's complicated, Jim laughed. Bitterly. Everything suddenly becomes complicated whenever billionaires are involved. Rachel crossed her arms. Daniel Crawford isn't innocent. Jim's jaw tightened. But Emily didn't believe he was evil either. Rachel added. Jim looked confused. Then why warn me about him? Rachel hesitated. Because Emily discovered Daniel was hiding something much bigger than Project Hollow. Lightning flashed across the sky. Jim waited silently. Rachel lowered her voice. Years ago, Daniel tried to shut Project Hollow down after learning innocent people were getting sick. That sounds like what Emily's letter said. Yes, Rachel replied. But when he tried exposing the people behind it, someone close to him disappeared. Jim frowned. Disappeared? His younger brother. Jim blinked in surprise. Rachel nodded. The official story was an accident during a hiking trip, but Daniel believed it was a warning. Jim remembered the fear in Daniel's eyes back in the office. Not fear for money, fear for lives. Rachel continued carefully. After that, Daniel stopped fighting publicly. Instead, he played along while secretly collecting evidence for years. Jim shook his head slowly. Then why would Emily warn me against him? Because Daniel made another mistake. Rachel looked away. A terrible one. Before Jim could ask more, Rachel's phone vibrated. Her face instantly changed after reading the message. What is it? She looked at him seriously. Your house. Jim's blood froze. What about it? They're already there. For a second, the world stopped. Jim immediately ran toward the street. Rachel grabbed him. Wait. That's my daughter. If you rush in blindly, you'll get both of you killed. Jim's eyes filled with panic. Sophie's alone. Rachel quickly pulled out a car. Key, come on. They sprinted toward an old gray sedan parked nearby. The engine roared to life as Rachel sped through the rain-soaked streets. Jim sat shaking in the passenger seat. Every horrible possibility flooded his mind. Had they taken Sophie? Was she hurt? Why were these people willing to chase them so aggressively? Rachel drove fast while speaking calmly. Listen to me carefully. If anything happens, your only priority is Sophie. Nothing else matters. Jim nodded silently. You understand? Yes. Rachel glanced at him. That's exactly why Emily trusted you. Jim swallowed hard. She trusted me, but she still lied to me. Rachel softened slightly. She was trying to protect the people she loved. Jim stared out the rain-covered window. So was I, he whispered. They reached Jim's neighborhood 15 minutes. Later, police lights flashed nearby. Jim's heart nearly stopped. Several houses stood dark in the storm while neighbors gathered outside nervously. Rachel Parked around the corner, Jim jumped out immediately. "Wait," Rachel warned again, but he was already running. When Jim reached his house, the front door hung open, broken. Inside, furniture was overturned. Glass covered the floor, drawers emptied, pictures destroyed. Jim rushed upstairs desperately. "Sophie!" No answer. His fear exploded. He searched every room frantically. Then suddenly, "Daddy?" Jim spun around. Sophie stood trembling near the bedroom closet, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Alive. Jim collapsed to his knees and hugged her tightly. "Oh, thank God." Sophie cried against his chest. "Bad men came here." Jim held her close. "It's okay. I've got you." But Sophie looked frightened. "They said Mommy left something behind." Jim froze. "What?" Sophie wiped her tears. One man said, "Find the second drive before Crawford does." Rachel slowly entered the room behind them. Her expression turned serious instantly. "There's another flash drive?" Jim looked stunned. Emily never mentioned a second drive. Neither had Daniel. Sophie sniffled softly. "Mommy hid something in the blue music box." Jim stared at her. "The one in the attic?" Sophie nodded. "She told me only you should find it if scary people ever came." Rachel and Jim exchanged shocked looks. Emily had prepared for this years ago. Jim immediately stood and hurried toward the attic ladder. Dust filled the air as he climbed upward. Boxes covered the cramped attic space. Old memories surrounded him everywhere. Christmas, decorations, Sophie's baby clothes, Emily's, painting supplies, and finally, a small blue music box. Jim carefully opened it. Inside was another flash drive and a folded photograph. Jim picked it up slowly. The image showed Daniel Crawford shaking hands with several executives. One face had been circled in red ink by Emily. Written beneath it were chilling words, "This is the real monster." Jim turned the photo over. His breath caught instantly because the circled man was someone Jim recognized, someone trusted by millions, a famous philanthropist, a beloved public figure, and, according to Emily, the true mastermind behind everything. Suddenly Rachel whispered, "Oh no." Jim looked at her. "You know him?" Rachel nodded fearfully. "Everyone does." Then headlights suddenly flooded through the broken house. Windows, vehicles surrounded the home. Doors slammed outside. Voices shouted they had been followed, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. The second flash drive headlights pierced through the broken windows like prison bars made of light. Outside, dark figures moved quickly around the house. Jim pulled Sophie close, instinctively. Rachel peeked through the curtain and cursed under her breath. "There are too many." Jim's heartbeat thundered. His home no longer felt safe, it felt hunted. Sophie clung tightly to his arm. "Daddy, are they bad people?" Jim forced himself to stay calm. "No matter what happens, you stay beside me." "Okay." She nodded nervously. Rachel turned toward Jim. "There's still a back exit through the neighbor's yard." Jim looked at Sophie, then at the second flash drive in his hand, then at Emily's photograph. With the circled face, his mind raced. "Who is he?" Jim whispered. Rachel hesitated before answering. "Victor Lang." Jim's eyes widened. Instantly, the name was impossible to ignore. Victor Lang was one of the most admired businessmen in the world. He funded hospitals, scholarships, disaster relief programs. Entire news networks called him the people's billionaire. Jim remembered watching interviews of Victor Lang speaking about kindness, ethics, and helping struggling families. Millions trusted him, and Emily believed he was the mastermind behind Project Hollow. "That can't be true," Jim said quietly. Rachel's face hardened. "That's exactly why he's dangerous." Outside, one of the men shouted, "Search every room." Footsteps approached the front porch. Rachel moved quickly. "We need to leave now." But Jim looked down at the flash drive again. "No." Rachel stared at him. "What?" Jim's fear slowly transformed into something else. Resolve. "They've chased us across the city. They broke into my home. My daughter is terrified." His jaw tightened. "I'm done running blindly." Rachel stepped closer urgently. "You can't fight these people alone." "Maybe not," Jim replied. "But Emily died trying to expose the truth. I'm not abandoning that." For a moment, Rachel saw something different in him. Not a desperate widower, not a broken Businessman dotted a father protecting his family. A man finally standing up after years of surviving quietly. The front door suddenly creaked open downstairs. They were inside, Rachel whispered sharply. Attic window now, Jim. Grabbed Sophie and followed Rachel across the attic floor. Rain slammed against the roof above them. Rachel forced open the small side window leading onto the rear slope of the house. Cold wind exploded inside. Hurry! One by one, they climbed carefully onto the slippery roof. Below them, flashlights swept through the backyard. Jim held Sophie tightly as they moved toward the neighboring house. Then suddenly, crack, a section of wet roof tile snapped. Beneath Jim's foot, he slipped hard. Sophie screamed. Jim barely caught the edge of the gutter with one hand while still holding Sophie with the other. Rachel instantly grabbed Sophie first and pulled her safely toward the neighbor's roof. Jim struggled desperately as rain poured into his eyes. Below, one of the men spotted him. There! Flashlights turned upward. Jim swung himself sideways just as someone grabbed at his leg from below. Rachel reached down. Take my hand. Jim grabbed her wrist. Together they pulled him onto the roof moments before several men rushed into the attic window. Behind them, the three escaped across neighboring yards and finally disappeared into the storm-dark streets. An hour later, they hid inside an old roadside motel far outside the city. The building looked forgotten by time. Flickering neon lights buzzed weakly outside. Sophie had finally fallen asleep, wrapped in a blanket beside Jim. For the first time all night, silence filled the room. Rachel placed the second flash drive onto the table. You ready? Jim looked at Emily's old music box beside him. No, he admitted quietly. Then he inserted the drive into the motel's old laptop. Folders appeared instantly. But unlike the first drive, this one contained video, recordings, dozens of them, secret meetings, private conversations, financial transfers, and one file named Daniel's confession. Jim frowned. Rachel clicked it. The screen flickered. Daniel Crawford appeared sitting alone in a dim office. He looked exhausted, older, defeated. If anyone is watching this, Daniel began, then I may already be dead. Jim felt a chill. Daniel continued, my biggest mistake wasn't creating enemies. It was believing I could control them. He looked directly into the camera. Victor Lang built Project Hollow long before I discovered it. Entire communities were sacrificed because pollution cleanup was considered too expensive. Sick families became statistics hidden inside corporate reports. Jim clenched his fists. Daniel's voice shook slightly. When I tried exposing the operation years ago, Victor reminded me how powerful he truly was. The video paused briefly, then another clip appeared. A younger Daniel arguing with Victor Lang inside a boardroom. Victor's calm voice echoed clearly. People only care about heroes, Daniel. That's why I became one. Jim stared in disbelief. Victor continued coldly. Poor neighborhoods don't influence elections. Sick workers don't scare investors. And desperate families are easy to silence. Jim's stomach turned. The recording ended abruptly. Rachel looked shaken even though she had already suspected the truth. This alone could destroy him, but Jim noticed something else, another folder labeled Sophie. His blood froze instantly. He opened it. Inside was a single video from Emily. She looked weaker than before, sicker, but peaceful. Hi, sweetheart. Emily whispered softly into the camera. Jim's eyes filled with tears immediately. If you're watching this with Daddy, then it means I couldn't stay as long as I wanted. Sophie slept quietly beside him while Emily's voice filled the room. You're the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Jim lowered his head. Emotionally, Emily smiled faintly. And Jim, there's something I need you to understand. She paused carefully. Daniel Crawford made terrible mistakes, but Victor Lang destroys lives without regret. That's the difference. Rachel looked at Jim silently. Emily continued. Daniel kept trying to fight back quietly, but he became trapped inside a system he helped build. Jim whispered softly. So she did trust him. Then Emily said something unexpected. Jim, Daniel isn't the hero of the story. Jim frowned. Emily's eyes filled with emotion. You are. Jim stared at the screen in disbelief. You spent years rebuilding after losing everything. You stayed kind even while hurting. You became the father Sophie needed. Tears rolled down Jim's face. Emily smiled gently. That's real strength. The video neared its end, but there's one final truth you must know. Suddenly, Emily's expression changed. Fear entered her eyes. She looked toward something off camera, then whispered, "Victor has someone inside federal law enforcement." Rachel straightened instantly. Emily's final words came trembling. "That's why nobody has been able to stop him." The screen went black. Silence consumed the motel. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Jim wiped his face slowly. Then, a car door slammed outside. Rachel moved instantly toward the curtain. Her expression darkened. "We've got company." Jim looked outside carefully. Black SUVs again, but this time, one familiar figure stepped out. Daniel Crawford, alone, standing in the rain, holding no weapon, only a single envelope in his hand. Rachel whispered nervously, "It could be a trap." Jim stared at the billionaire through the motel window. Daniel looked exhausted, broken, and somehow sincere. Then Daniel slowly raised the envelope toward the glass. Written across the front were 3 words in Emily's handwriting. "For both of you." Emily's final secret. Rain poured steadily across the motel parking lot. Daniel Crawford stood alone beneath the flickering neon sign, soaked from head to toe, holding the envelope carefully against his chest. Jim watched silently through the curtain. Rachel remained tense beside him. "This doesn't feel right," she whispered. Jim understood her fear. Every instinct told him this could still be another manipulation, another trap. But then he looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully on the bed, and he remembered Emily's words. Daniel kept trying to fight back quietly. Jim took a slow breath. "I need to hear what he has to say." Rachel grabbed his arm. "If Victor Lang knows Daniel found you, this place could become a battlefield in minutes." Jim nodded. "Then we don't have much time." He quietly stepped outside into the rain. Daniel didn't move closer, didn't reach into his coat, didn't defend himself. He simply handed Jim the envelope. His voice was tired. "She wanted us to open it together." Jim looked at the handwriting. Again, Emily's handwriting. For a moment, the world felt painfully still. Jim opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 2 things: a handwritten letter and a small key. Daniel's face changed the moment he saw it. The safety deposit key. Jim looked at him sharply. "You know what it opens?" Daniel nodded slowly. Emily created a final backup of everything: names, payments, hidden accounts. Enough evidence to expose Project Hollow completely. Rachel stepped outside immediately. Then why didn't she release it herself? Daniel lowered his eyes. Because she realized something terrifying. Jim unfolded the letter. Rain dripped from the paper as he began reading aloud. "Jim and Daniel, if you are reading this together, then maybe there is still hope. I know neither of you fully trusts the other, but the truth is bigger than both of you now. Victor Lang built his power carefully. He hides behind charity, influence, and fear. People trust him because they want to believe successful people are always good. But real character is revealed when nobody is watching. I discovered that Victor kept records of everyone involved in Project Hollow, and politicians, executives, investigators, even law enforcement officials. That evidence is hidden in Safety Deposit Box 331 at First National Trust Bank. But listen carefully. If the files are released carelessly, innocent employees and families could become targets too. The truth must be handled responsibly. Promise me something. Do not become consumed by revenge. People already suffered enough. Use the truth to protect others, not destroy yourselves." Jim slowly lowered the letter. Silence filled the parking lot. Daniel stared at the key, emotionally. She still believed people could choose better. He whispered. Jim looked at him carefully. "For someone she warned me about, she still trusted you." Daniel gave a painful smile. "She trusted the man I was trying to become, not the man I used to be." Before Jim could respond, Rachel's phone suddenly rang. She answered quickly. Her expression changed instantly. "What happened?" She listened silently, then looked at Jim and Daniel with alarm. "We're too late." Jim's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Rachel lowered the phone slowly. Victor Lang just went live on national television. Inside the motel room, the old television flickered on. Every major news network carried the same emergency broadcast. Victor Lang stood behind a polished podium surrounded by reporters and cameras, calm, confident, sympathetic, exactly the public image people loved. Victor Lang spoke with practiced sincerity. Today, false accusations and manipulated evidence have been used in an attempt to damage charitable organizations that help millions of families. Jim clenched his fists. Victor continued smoothly. Sadly, desperate individuals sometimes spread misinformation for personal gain. A photograph suddenly appeared on the screen, Jim's face. Then Daniel's. News headlines exploded beneath them. Business tycoon connected to extortion scheme, missing evidence linked to former repair shop owner. Rachel whispered, "He's framing you first." Daniel stared coldly at the screen. Victor continued, "I have fully cooperated with authorities, and tonight federal investigators have issued warrants for Daniel Crawford and James Walton." Jim's blood froze. Sophie slowly woke up on the bed. "Daddy?" Jim forced himself to stay calm. "It's okay." But then another face appeared beside. Victor, during the broadcast, a federal official. Rachel's eyes widened immediately. "That's him." Jim looked over. "You know him?" Rachel nodded grimly. "Deputy Attorney General Marcus Vale." Marcus Vale, the man Emily warned about. The protector inside law enforcement. Marcus stepped toward the microphones. "We urge the public to report any information regarding the whereabouts of these dangerous individuals." Dangerous. Jim almost laughed bitterly. People exposing poisoned communities were now being labeled criminals. Victor Lang lowered his voice. "Carefully for the cameras. This is a painful day, but no one is above the law." Daniel suddenly turned off the television. Silence returned. Heavy silence. The kind that changes lives forever. Jim looked at Daniel. "What now?" The billionaire answered honestly. "We stop running." Rachel frowned. "That's suicide." "No," Daniel replied. "It's exactly what Victor expects. He wants us isolated, desperate, emotional." Jim looked down at Sophie sitting quietly beside him, then at Emily's letter, then at the safety deposit key, and something inside him finally became clear. For months after Emily's death, Jim had lived only to survive each day, pay bills, hide pain, keep moving. But survival wasn't enough anymore. People were still suffering because powerful men believed ordinary families didn't matter. Jim slowly stood up. "We go to the bank." Rachel looked shocked. "They'll be watching every exit in the city. Then we stop thinking like scared people," Jim said calmly. Daniel studied him carefully. For the first time, the billionaire saw not a grieving widower, but a leader, a man transformed by hardship instead of destroyed by it. Daniel nodded slowly. "Emily was right about you." Jim grabbed his coat. "Can you get us inside the bank?" Daniel answered quietly, "Yes." Rachel still looked uncertain. And after that, Jim looked at Sophie, then at Emily's music box sitting on the table. Finally, he spoke the words that changed everything. "After that, we tell the truth publicly." Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Far away, hidden inside a heavily guarded office, Victor Lang watched the same storm through massive glass windows. One of his assistants approached nervously. "Sir, should we move the remaining files?" Victor remained calm. "No." The assistant hesitated. "But what if Crawford reaches the deposit box?" Victor slowly smiled. "He won't." The assistant looked confused. Victor turned toward the television screen showing Jim's face. "Because tomorrow morning," his smile faded coldly, "they'll all be dead." The truth that changed everything. Before sunrise, the city felt unusually quiet. The storm had passed, but danger remained everywhere. Jim sat beside Sophie in the back seat of an old delivery van, while Daniel Crawford drove through empty downtown streets. Rachel monitored police scanners from the passenger seat. Every channel repeated the same warning. Suspects James Walton and Daniel Crawford remain at large. Jim looked out the window silently. Just days ago, he had been invisible to the world. Now millions believed he was a criminal, It would have terrified him once, but something inside him had changed. Emily's words stayed with him. Use the truth to protect others. That became his focus. Not revenge, not anger. Protection. Daniel. Finally parked inside an underground service tunnel beneath First National Trust Bank. First National Trust Bank towered above them in silence. Rachel looked uneasy. This place will already be compromised. Daniel nodded. Probably. Then why come? Because Victor thinks fear controls everyone, Daniel answered. That's how men like him stay powerful. Jim tightened his grip on the safety deposit key, and today we prove him wrong. They entered through an old maintenance corridor Daniel still had access to from years earlier. Every step echoed. Every shadow felt dangerous. Finally, they reached the private vault floor. Rows of steel deposit boxes lined the walls. Jim found box 331. His hands trembled slightly as he inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Inside was a thick sealed envelope, several encrypted drives, and one final handwritten note from Emily. Jim unfolded it carefully. If you made it this far, then you already know something important. Fear grows when good people stay silent, but truth grows when ordinary people stand together. Do not risk innocent lives trying to punish everyone involved. Focus on exposing the system, protecting families, and creating change. Pain can make people bitter, or better. Choose better. Daniel lowered his head quietly. Rachel immediately examined the drives. Her eyes widened. This is everything. What kind of everything? Jim asked. Financial transfers, secret agreements, medical reports proving toxic exposure, private recordings. She looked stunned. Emily documented the entire network. Suddenly, alarms exploded throughout the vault. Red emergency lights flashed. Rachel looked toward the security monitors. Oh no. Jim turned sharply. Several armed teams were entering the bank from every level. Marcus Vale himself walked calmly through the lobby surrounded by federal agents. Daniel cursed under his breath. They tracked the key. Rachel grabbed the evidence. We need another exit. But Jim noticed something strange on the security screen. Not all the agents looked confident. Some looked confused, uncertain. Then Jim understood. Victor's control depended on secrecy. Most people inside law enforcement probably didn't know the full truth. Jim looked at Daniel. We don't run anymore. Daniel frowned. What are you suggesting? Jim pulled out his phone. We go public right now. Rachel's eyes widened. Here? Jim nodded. If Victor controls private systems, then we use something he can't fully stop fast enough. Daniel slowly realized the plan. A live broadcast. Jim quickly connected Rachel's laptop to the bank's public emergency network. Within seconds, multiple live-stream platforms activated simultaneously. News stations began picking up the unauthorized broadcast automatically. Millions of people suddenly saw the image feed appear online. Jim Walton stood in the center of the vault beside Daniel Crawford. Rachel uploaded the files in real time. Documents, videos, names, evidence, everything. Jim looked directly into the camera. His voice shook slightly at first, then steadied. My name is Jim Walton. I'm not a criminal. I'm a father whose wife died trying to protect innocent people. Around the country, viewers stopped and watched. News anchors fell silent. Employees, inside Victor Lang's companies, stared at their screens in disbelief. Jim continued. My wife, Emily, discovered evidence linking powerful individuals to illegal toxic dumping that harmed vulnerable communities for years. Rachel displayed medical reports and financial records beside him. Daniel stepped forward next. I stayed silent too long because I believed I could fight corruption quietly from inside the system. He lowered his eyes. I was wrong. More evidence appeared on screen. Victor Lang's recorded meetings, hidden payments, manipulated investigations. Then the leaked recording played publicly for the first time. Victor's cold voice echoed worldwide. Poor neighborhoods don't influence elections. Shock exploded across social media instantly. Inside the bank lobby, federal agents stopped moving. Many stared at the evidence appearing live before them. Marcus Vale shouted angrily, "Shut it down!" But it was too late. The truth was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Rachel uploaded the final files, lists of secret accounts, internal emails, environmental reports hidden for years. Jim looked back at the camera one last time. This isn't about destroying people. It's about making sure no family suffers in silence again. Then he added softly, Emily believed ordinary people still had the power to choose kindness, honesty, and courage. I want to believe that too. The live stream ended. Silence filled the vault. A few moments later, the bank doors upstairs burst open, but this time something unexpected happened. Several agents lowered their weapons. One older investigator stepped forward carefully. He looked directly at Marcus Vale. Sir, is any of this true? Marcus's confidence cracked instantly. Daniel whispered quietly, It's over. Above the city, helicopters circled news stations, markets reacted, emergency investigations launched immediately, and across the country, families from affected communities finally realized someone had been fighting for them all along. 3 months later, sunlight filled a newly built community center on the edge of a recovering neighborhood. Children laughed outside. Trees had been planted where abandoned lots once stood. A sign near the entrance read, The Emily Walton Family Center Gym stood quietly beside Sophie during the opening ceremony. Rachel smiled nearby, now leading a non-profit investigative foundation focused on environmental accountability. Daniel Crawford had resigned from all executive positions and redirected most of his wealth into cleanup projects, medical support funds, and public transparency programs. Many legal battles still remained. Healing would take years. But change had finally begun. Sophie tugged gently on Jim's hand. Mommy would like this place. Jim smiled emotionally. She really would. Nearby, a mural showed Emily surrounded by families, workers, and children. Not as a perfect hero, but as a reminder that ordinary compassion can create extraordinary change. Jim looked at the mural quietly. For the first time in years, the weight inside his chest felt lighter. Not because the pain disappeared, but because pain no longer controlled his future. Emily's final lesson stayed with him forever. Broken moments do not have to break people. Sometimes, they become the reason people rise.